Here's the arc of piracy. They make billions. I mean, in today's money, billions of dollars. I did the math. These guys, the Lafitte brothers, had like $1.5 billion in assets that I could add up, like on Ledger.
Yeah.
Okay,
Oh.
$1.5 billion. Like I did the math in today's money.
Okay. Wow.
So you figure they're pirates. There's twice that much that didn't go through like an actual sales ledger. Let's say they were 3 billionaires. They end this adventure destitute because of course they do.
I know, right?
They got all of their money by making bad decisions. They continue to make bad decisions.
Right. Hello and welcome back to The Buck Starts Here, the podcast that usually digs deep into the juicy stories, power plays, and wild twists that shape the presidencies of the United States. My name is Kyle, the Calico Jack to Ray's and Bonnie, and today we're finally getting around to that Jean Lafitte special. So Ray, have you finished doing all the work so I can take all the credit for it yet?
Absolutely. That's totally what the women pirates did.
Yes, exactly. That's what Calico Jack was famous for, wasn't it?
Yes.
All right, so we have a special that I've been wanting to do for a long time, especially after Eric's vehement defense of why the Battle of New Orleans did not matter. He liked to rip on Andrew Jackson for being completely unnecessary at this battle. And then we were kind of dug into it. We saw that Mr. Lafitte here and his brother actually kind of played a pretty pivotal role in this, or at least modern sources kind of depict it that way. So today we're kind of planning on diving in a little bit more into the story to kind of figure out what really happened, or at least what we know about it, which, spoiler, it's not a lot.
It's Jean Lafitte, the pirate.
Jean or Jean? Let's get this one right.
It's Jean.
Jean.
It's Jean.
Okay.
I have a brother named Jean. So yeah, it's Jean.
Okay.
That's the French.
It's like Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Yes. It's Jean. It's just John.
Yeah. Okay, well, what about the Lafitte then? Is it Lafitte? Lafayette?
Well, it would be Lafitte.
Lafitte.
But we're not French, so we would just say Lafitte.
Lafitte.
And they would snub their nose at us and tell us our father smells of elderberries.
Well, so were the Lafitte brothers actually French? That's something that I've been having trouble finding, even like just consensus around where they were born. Like there's the most likely place looks to be like a French colony of Saint-Domingue, which is like modern day Haiti. But there's another case, I think, that people try to make of them being around like the Bordeaux region of actual France.
And there's actually a third case where there's some insistence that they were in fact Spanish.
Yeah, I did see that too.
my brother Jean is actually on the Spanish side of my family. So he actually is a Jean, but of a Spanish family. So it's Spanish family. So that's, right. I think maybe what happened was they had some notary or something done where there was confusion and their names were put in Spanish versus in the original French. But if they were raised in Haiti, then they would have been French citizens, at least, regardless of where their parents came from.
Right, but I think the Spanish confusion is just because they tend to operate mostly in like the Spanish Louisiana territory.
Yeah,
and
like
they
were using that nomenclature.
Yeah. Interesting thing about the name, though, we were talking about this a little bit beforehand about like the spelling and how like the Lafitte's they spelled it like in this weird way with like one T and two F's as opposed to like the way we want to do it with two F's and two T's.
Yeah, or one F and two T's.
Right. Right.
Yeah, it's and it's hard to say. I mean, you see like a lot of, especially handwriting and whatnot, that comes down from 19th century documents, and just the way people wrote look very different. You see a lot of like people use S and F almost interchangeably.
Oh, I hated that.
Or what we would call, So I would say as long as we know who we're talking about, we're doing okay, because there's not any surviving family to correct us to say this is how our family name should be.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah.
We'll get into that a little bit later here.
Sorry, spoiler alert, everybody dies.
So no, I guess the question then is like, was the one spelling? Because I think that's what my wife found when she was trying to look up the pronunciations. Was that the odd spelling was on most of their Spanish documents, and if they wrote things for the Spanish documents, they spelled it one way. If they did it in French documents or other documents, they did it a different way.
And most of their signatures appear to have two F's and one T.
Interesting. Okay, so it's the opposite of what.
That was what I found.
Right.
Or I'm sorry, two F's and only one T, where
Yes,
we would
okay.
do one F and two T's.
Yeah.
So that was, and I don't know about Jean, but Pierre appeared to have signed a lot of things in that way.
So this is it. We'll get to that a little bit later, but first I want to go through a little bit of their youth, like what the little bit that we know about it.
Tell us who in the hell these guys are that we're talking about.
So we kind of know, or at least what we've inferred, I guess. None of this is like really documented. So a lot of this stuff is just kind of things that are either based off of records where they operated, language, skills, associations, migration patterns, and records of Pierre himself. Because he seems to be the more documented brother. From what I found, it seems like he was the more charismatic one. I think he was like the face of most of their business operations.
He seems like he was the CEO.
Yeah, he was the guy who was out there like shaking hands with investors and making all the business connections. Yeah. So they likely believe that they grew up in like French colonial or the French Caribbean. Saint Domingue is obviously the one where they think that he's most likely born. He did speak fluent French. He had a colonial rather than a metropolitan tone, so like his accent kind of sounded like it was more from one of these colonies as opposed to like the mainland of France. He did operate a lot in the Caribbean Maritime Network, so it makes it seem like he's just, has a lot of history there. Many of his associates were refugees of the Haitian Revolution, so there's another tie there. And he also demonstrated a lot of knowledge of like Caribbean trade routes, port smuggling systems that he must have learned when he was young. There's no school records, no church registries, no apprentice documents, nothing that confirmed any of this. This is all just inference.
Yeah, I think there's just not a lot of stuff that survives. So a lot of times when you're looking at people, especially who are in colonial settlements at this time, and I look, looking at art, I'm always looking for provenance. Where did this come from? Who bought it? Who traded it? Who sold it? And a lot of things it's been written down way after it happened.
Yes, right.
People just didn't keep records. And I don't know. I've been in the Caribbean. I don't imagine like paper lasts very long there.
No. I mean,
it's
what
like
was it?
rots and melts,
There's that place where Washington and his brother stayed at in Barbados that we talked about. And I think there's like actually a building there with a tourist attraction, like you can go visit. But there's been like 3 hurricanes that have completely leveled everything on that island since that time. There's no way that building is there anymore.
It's an approximation of the building that used to be there. And I think that's probably how record keeping ends up working. So
I think that also
I think you could look at anybody, not just pirates in this area and this time, and not get a lot of good records.
And honestly, I think
Pierre actually had some really robust records compared to other people, I would think.
Well, I think that the lack of records is probably just more confirmation that they're most likely from the Caribbean, because you got to think that there'd be better record keeping in like mainland France, or if he was from Spain, that Spain probably had better going on at that time, right? Yeah,
that they'd be sending their documentation back to the home office in a climate where paper doesn't melt.
Let's see. There are some claims too that I came across that suspect that the family came from like a merchant or artisan family. Mostly because they point to his literacy in French, the way he handled contracts and correspondences, the way he navigated the legal gray areas.
Yeah,
but there's nothing that supported that.
Yeah, I saw both of those claims that it was either a merchant family or an artisan family.
Or
I saw claims that it was that his parents were victims of Monsieur Guillotine, which I don't buy that.
Too. Yeah,
I don't buy any aristocracy there. There are very few, and I just want to say from the golden age of piracy forward, there are very few pirates whose names we know that came from aristocratic families.
Steve Bonnet would probably be the only
Steve Bonnet was one of the few.
He's also the worst pirate too, I think.
He was a great pirate. Stop that.
No, I mean, he was bad at piracy.
He was a good boss,
he was famously bad at piracy. Yes.
Benjamin Hornigold was another one. There were a few that were, but it became not a job you wanted your upper class children to go into.
No,
So the idea that Jean and Pierre would have been such great pirates coming from an aristocratic family is
kind of
negligible to me.
ludicrous. Yeah, why would you
Yeah.
risk that? Yeah.
Well,
Piracy
you're
is
sitting. I mean, you're sitting pretty. The idea you go into piracy because you're stuck in the British Navy, you've been
right.
conscripted, and you've nothing better to do.
Look, if you're aristocratic and you're doing that, you most likely you're hiring the pirates, and then you're just trying to basically fund
In
their
which case,
expeditions.
you're Stede Bonnet.
Yes. All right, so let's talk a little bit then more about, I guess, Brother Pierre, since, as you said, I think there was more information on him. He was the close operational partner. He appears in multiple legal and government documents that connect him to the smuggling and privateering activities based in Louisiana. Should we mention, I guess, a note on privateering and like the difference between that and piracy?
We should make a note on that. And it's important to say that Pierre, it seems to me that Pierre was trying to put a legitimate public face on the organization.
Right. Yeah, he managed.
This is not a family. This is a business.
He was the guy that I think would handle he's the handler of all the captured cargo. Interestingly, they were a lot of contemporary observers referred to them as the brothers, the Lafitte brothers. So it wasn't just like, Jean and his brother Pierre hanging around. Like he looks like he was like
they were equal partners.
Right.
Yeah, and Pierre was really doing the laundering, the cleaning of the goods as they came through. And it's important to talk about too that these weren't illicit goods. They were dodging taxes and tariffs and customs. They weren't selling anything illegal. They were selling like grain and people.
Was it the tariffs of abomination that happened like right before this that I think is the reason for like all this that popped up? Yeah.
Pierre ends up as the business guy, but we got to talk about privateering real quick.
Privateering, yes. So the difference between privateering and piracy is that one of them is sponsored by basically a local government, right? You get a letter of marque from France, and they say you can go attack all the Spanish ships you want and plunder them all you want because we're at war with Spain.
Oh, we're at war with Spain, and we don't want to pay you
to
go to war with those other guys.
So you're just going to work off of capturing
prizes. You're going to work, and we'll let you take some of whatever you capture. And if you don't get a Spanish galleon full of doubloons, then sorry, you're about your luck. You'll probably get mutinied and left on an island somewhere. So this was a really economical, because I mean, we talk about economics a lot, and I know because Eric's not here, I'm going to be the economist today.
Oh, all right.
A job for which I'm not qualified. To me, this seems like a really smart move. If you're like the British Navy or the American Navy, like this is a great move because you just got a free fleet of ships, free guys. They were providing their own munitions, their own weapons, their own cannon, their own supplies. They're sitting around doing your dirty work for you. And then when you decide you don't want them anymore, you stop calling them privateers, declare them pirates, and you just hang them. And then you take all their shit.
Right. I don't think that's how it's quite supposed to work, but I see. Yeah, okay, I see.
But that's how it shook out, and we'll talk about that later because that was the expectation of every pirate.
Once you had the taste of that pirate life, you don't want to go back. Once that war is over, you're not just suddenly
go back to work for the man,
right? Even though you were, I guess, technically doing
working for the man.
So actually, that privateering, I think we should probably keep that in mind because that will come into play later as we get closer to the Battle of New Orleans. But Brother Pierre was basically the one who managed the smuggling network. Am I saying this name right? The Barataria network?
It's Baratarians.
Barataria Bay?
I believe. Is it Baratarians or Baratarians? I thought Baratarians, but I could be wrong.
That's what I'm going to go with. So if it's wrong, then it's going to be wrong for the whole thing.
Then whatever. Let's just pick one and go with it. Just like Lafitte.
Yeah. So it looks to me like Jean, or at least from the information I found, Jean was more of like the ship commander. He handled most of the privateering actions. He was the military coordinator. He was like the admiral, I guess, out there, like managing all like the operations. Whereas Pierre, as we discussed, was more of the distributor. He was the one who was selling off all the smuggled goods. He was the one making all those connections with the different merchants and the legal maneuverings to get around the tariffs of abomination and other
Right, which we
deals.
assume involves paying your local
Exactly. It's just
policeman's
bribe money is what that is.
constabulary. Like we give some out
Yeah.
for this, right?
And
They
there
made tons.
is,
They made tons of
oh,
money.
oh yeah,
Tons of money.
yeah. So in 1813, actually, Pierre was captured and arrested by U.S. authorities during the efforts to suppress smuggling options in Louisiana. He was imprisoned in New Orleans, which temporarily disrupted their enterprise. And that became strategically important later when John was negotiating with the American authorities prior to the Battle of New Orleans. Reportedly, John was trying to get his brother's release as part of his cooperation agreements with U.S. officials, which interesting is something that England couldn't do. Like they can't really promise that, can they?
Yeah. So this is like it's interesting. Pierre gets nicked, and it's by like the 19th century version of the Customs Enforcement Police, right? Like the Border Patrol.
Yeah, yeah.
They're like the Border Patrol and the Coasties roll up, and they're just like straight to jail, dude. You owe us $80 million in taxes. We've just been waiting.
Yeah.
So they take him off to the clink, and meanwhile, all this other war 1812 business is
Yeah.
brewing.
Well,
And
okay, I'm sorry. It's a little bit more
what do you
worse than the
do?
Terrace of Abomination. Actually, we embargoed like everything, and so we weren't like allowed to trade with the rest of the world. So, yeah, somebody's going to try to step in and fill that gap.
There's always, yeah, and again, if it's I'm not an economist hat. The worst thing you can do is ban something, because all you do is create an entirely separate marketplace that you can't see.
You saying that banning alcohol was not a good idea?
Well, I mean, I'm not saying it. I think it's obvious to see that if you look at it. But this idea, like we're going to embargo this, like we're going to not, we're going to not let people do business with Britain.
Mm-hmm.
How are you asking people to do that, to just change overnight? Like, maybe it's easy if you're in Congress to say, well, we don't like those guys today, but I have a business relationship with these guys over here, and I don't really care. It's not my war.
Yeah, right.
It's hard to argue against people going around. And I think it's difficult to imagine as well in our day and age. This was happening and like nobody knew. Like you could go around an embargo line, and if you just sailed far enough around it, nobody would know.
I think that's also like I guess the thing that maybe gets lost when you just hear the name Barataria Bay. Like you don't really realize what that whole area is like. Is just nothing but like numerous waterways and like channels that just crisscross the entire coast.
Squiggle your way out.
Right, and eventually you end up on the Mississippi if you do it right.
Yeah, nobody notices you came or went. And these guys probably thought, we're just going to ignore whatever is going on with the government. We're going to continue doing business. Yeah. Just like it's what I would do. Just ignore it, and hopefully it goes away.
Right.
Unfortunately for the Lafitte brothers, not so much.
No, not quite. Should we talk about the smuggling operations then?
Yes, let's talk about the smuggling.
All right.
Who doesn't love a scofflaw?
After the Louisiana Purchase, is when the U.S. started imposing tighter customs controls and tariffs at New Orleans in particular. Created market opportunity, obviously, because imported goods becoming more expensive. Slave importation also became illegal in 1808. The Caribbean trades faced new restrictions. Enforcement capacity still remained limited. So all this basically means is that smugglers could supply high demand goods at really low prices. The Lafitte's organized a multi-stage logistics system. So they had offshore interceptions with privateering vessels that were captured or purchased ships of the Gulf. They transferred the cargo to smaller vessels, and then from those shallow draft boats would carry goods through the bayous. They moved all the cargo at night to avoid patrols. They had warehouses hidden on different islands in the marshlands, and the goods were all sorted and prepared for sale. They had a huge distribution network with local merchants purchasing the goods at discounts, and then the items would be resold legally in city markets. So it's basically like an early black market import network rather than your typical piracy.
These guys were doing
the entire like distribution of it.
Everything.
Yes.
They were like Amazon, right?
Jean would go out in the boats. He'd go
were,
capture the ships and the goods,
yep.
and he'd bring it back to his brother, who'd sort it and distribute it and sell it.
Yep, they were the importer, the sorter, the distributor, the salesman,
the George Costanza.
The marketer. They were the George Costanza. Yeah, they were doing
art land. What was it? Art. What was it? Art. Art Vandelay.
Art Vandelay.
The importer exporter.
Vandelay imports. Shout out to Jay, my brother Jean. He would love to hear someone say Vandelay. Vandelay Industries. The not sponsor of everything in our lives. I'll be like, how's it going? He'll be like, today's bowling trip is sponsored by Vandelay Industries. And I'm like, it's not real.
Yeah.
But the Lafitte Industries was real. They were doing, the logistics, from what I could see, the research that I was able to, it was hard to get numbers. I know. Hundreds of people working in a variety of roles.
I had estimates of 500 to 1,000 sailors and workers.
Yeah. And so, obviously, you figure the guy's got a ship. It's an armada, exactly. He's probably got 5 or 6 in his little crew. Some are big, some are small. There's a couple hundred guys there. But in addition to that, an equal force of workers in, I can only assume, their warehouse and distribution network.
You got to have a bunch of longshoremen, basically. They're ready to unload everything.
They were really forward thinking in their economics. It's really impressive. Far more than everyone talks about the golden age of piracy, Blackbeard and Calico Jack and all of those guys. And they had the pirate democracy at Nassau, but they didn't have they weren't doing capitalism like this. This is awesome what these guys were doing. And so I know when you were like, oh, the Patriot pirate, I was like, I don't know so much about Patriot, but good businessman.
Good businessman, but again, there's a lot of slave importation here too. So I balance that before we.
Yeah,
a lot of bad stuff happening here too.
We're gonna have to give him a minus. At least half his points have to come off for selling.
He doesn't
people.
He's not a president. He didn't get ranked.
We're not ranking him.
You don't get any of that.
I was so stoked to do a rank.
He's not a president.
Damn. Boo.
So anyway, okay. So we're getting. I think we're coming up on about the 1814 raid on Barataria, and what actually happened there.
So they've got their economic hub.
Things
They're
are
all
booming
hanging out there. Oh, money hand over fist. Everybody's just raking it in.
Embargo against the world, which kind of pissed off a lot of people, but business is going well for them.
But also opens business opportunities for people who are willing to take a risk, right?
Yes.
Well, it's a fair market.
So obviously the war is also going on at this point too. In mid-1814s, we had some British officers approach Jean, seeking pilots familiar with the Louisiana waters. They're also looking for logistical support and an alliance against the United States. Now, from what I can read, Lafitte here stalled the negotiations and actually informed Louisiana authorities.
He does a bit of brinksmanship.
Right?
Basically, Britain comes in and they say, "Hey,
a lot of nice ships there and a lot of men we could probably use.
We're looking for some help. We got these cool letters of marque.
Yeah, we'll forgive your piracy.
We might forgive your previous crimes against the British Empire.
Right.
We might.
We
might give you land grants somewhere if you promise never to do the piracy again.
Right.
But really what they're doing is they're just going to anyone they can. They're trying to just get people who are willing to basically work behind enemy lines.
That sounds like the Brits.
They're like, hey, Jean, here's the deal. You work for us. You're already behind enemy lines. You do our dirty work and maybe we'll throw you some whatever we have.
Right.
And he does a great bit of brinksmanship. He puts them off. He takes their parlay, right? He sits down with them and has he invites them in, and I'm sure very gentlemanly. He was known as a gentleman pirate. And I'm sure he was very nice with them. And then he says, well, I have to take some time to make a decision. I don't remember if it was a couple of weeks he said he needed, and he turns around and he rats them out to the Americans.
Right.
And he says to the Americans, hey, I'm going to rat these guys out to you, but here's the deal. Y'all have my brother on this trumped up customs shit, and I'd like
him back.
That's the one thing the British can't give me.
Right.
And I know I have valuable intelligence.
Not to mention manpower too.
It was, and it's really good because he recognizes his leverage. It's not just the manpower and the boats. it's almost like saying, I'm giving you a little information. I'll tell you the British have come and asked me to be their buddy.
Mm-hmm.
You want a little more of that? I think he's holding the intelligence a little bit as well. And it's a good move.
He actually obtained written proof from his British to get proof of the contact from the British. Like,
so
yes,
so
he's playing this.
I read a couple of different claims about that he definitely got it in writing, which is great advice, kids.
Baller.
Get it in writing.
Always get it in writing.
But he gets it in writing, and some people interpreted that as like he was keeping that in his back pocket in the event that he did side with the British. He'd have it in writing in court. But I think that's the wrong lens from which to look at this. British court is very different than American court, and British Admiralty, like naval court, is even way more different.
Oh, yeah.
They actually don't have to hear your side at all.
Nope.
They can
just
say,
that innocent
we
until proven
find
guilty.
Yep. Yeah, we find you wanting in the department of go to jail. So I feel like he might have gotten that in writing to prove to the Americans, I have this information. Like I have been in touch with them.
Do you think it's the proof that he was in touch, or is it more of like proof of the deal they're offering so we can try to get a better deal? It's like, look what they're giving me here.
I mean, both. I think you interpret it as he was going to use it later for protection in the British court is the wrong way to look at it. I think it was all about getting it in writing to show it to the Americans.
To get a better deal from the Americans. Yeah.
One way or the other.
Yep.
Right, which is great because he wants his brother out of prison. And also, it wasn't just the brother. They took a bunch of stuff, as they do. We all know what happens to your lemon pound cake.
Right.
Take it right out the door.
The United States actually preemptively attacked and basically destroyed the Barataria base in 1814. It was the largest U.S. anti-smuggling operation prior to the Civil War. And basically the U.S. is like, we can't let these guys collaborate with Britain. Like, that is not going to work for us.
Yeah.
I think that kind of backfired a little bit on him, but I do see that he still like agreed to work with them. So there was like, they raided his base, but yet he was still able to make a deal, which is kind of interesting.
Well, yeah. I mean, and this is like, I don't know how I feel about that. Part of me is like, this guy came to you with information and you raided his base anyways. It's kind of like, it's a dick move. Let's be fair.
Yeah. But he was also still importing a lot of slaves and other illegal goods into the United States.
On the other hand, it's a show of force to the pirates at Barataria.
Yes.
Like, listen, guys.
Like, we let this slide for now, but we're done.
We heard you talking to the British. Here's what we're going to do to you if you get on with the British. Like, you need to get on board with us. Like, and so I don't know. I don't know if it was a brakesman thing on the side of the Americans to. And sadly, as fascinating as all this is, there's just not that much written about it.
Right.
Like, I wasn't able to find a lot of good first-hand sources.
No, there's not a lot, and it gets even worse too after this event ends too.
It just collapses after that historically.
Right. So yeah, I mean, we do see that Lafitte did choose to work with the United States. They didn't force him into it, from what we can tell, even though they did raid and destroy his base and had his brother under lock and key. So I don't know, maybe that is being a little too generous. I don't know. They say he chose the United States for basically just the fact that he's in the Louisiana market. It'd be stupid to go side with the British unless you thought the British were going to like go retake Louisiana.
Yeah, and I thought that too. Like, for me, that was the big like question about Patriot or not.
No, I think he got pardons for everything too.
I live here, and if the British are marching down my street, like, I live here. You can't come in. Like, it's going to be, and he did better than the bare minimum, defending his homeland.
So what he got out of the deal, or at least what the United States offered, they got pardons for past piracy and smuggling, the release of all imprisoned associates, including Pierre, legal protection from prosecution, and they got permission to retain their seized property in some cases.
Yes, some of their seized property. So, I mean, it worked out pretty. It's better than what the British were offering.
That's a really good deal. Yeah.
Let's be fair.
Yeah.
The British were basically offering a nothing burger. The British were saying like, "Oh, well, we'll
We
give
won't
you
kill
some
you.
land in some other territory."
Yeah. And we
Because
won't hang you.
The British can't give you land in Louisiana where you're from,
Right.
right? Where you
Right.
live,
No, they can't.
because they don't own it. So, it's kind of it's almost a no-brainer. I thought it was it was a good negotiating tactic.
Do you
And
think that? Do you think that Jean any point was thinking about rehabilitating his image? Like, oh, if
hell
I help fight for
no,
the
no
U.S. Yeah.
way.
Right. Okay. That's what
No.
I thought.
Pirates don't do that.
Right. Yeah. That's not
Listen,
pirate
here's
behavior.
the arc of piracy. They make billions. I mean, in today's money, billions of dollars. I did the math. These guys, the Lafitte brothers, had like $1.5 billion in assets that I could add up, like on
Mm.
Ledger.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh wow.
$1.5 billion. Like I did the
Oh,
math
hot
in today's
dang.
money.
Okay. Wow.
So you figure they're pirates. There's twice that much that didn't go through like an
Yeah.
actual sales ledger.
Yeah.
So let's call it. They were 3 billionaires. They they end this adventure destitute because of course they do.
I know, right?
They got all of their money by making bad decisions. They continue to make bad decisions. Right. Pirates are notorious all the way through European history for taking the pardon, getting straight, becoming a landowner,
and then realizing that
it siren
sucks.
Call, there's free money on the seas.
Yeah.
I married a woman and I'm not happy about it. I gotta get the hell out of here. And going back and getting hung. Yep. It's a tale as old as time. This is how pirates go down. So I'm not surprised at all. I know. I don't think he had any rehabilitate his image in what way.
Right.
Maybe for Pierre. Maybe for Pierre there had been
maybe.
It's interesting because Pierre seems to drop off the historical record.
Basically, after like the War of 1812, like he's pretty much out. They didn't even know where he died.
It might be that Pierre is the smart one.
Right? Who never, it's like, you know what? That was good. I'm done.
I know when to fold them and I'm out, you know? And he might have taken his, also he was in jail. Maybe that sucked really bad.
Yeah, because it didn't sound like he got out very quickly either.
No, it was years. So, maybe he was like, listen, I got out of jail. I got my money back. I want to get away from all of this. Like, but Jean goes right back to pirating. Of course he does.
Well, we'll get to that. We're going to finish talking about the raid here.
Yeah. We'll talk about the raid. I mean, but you asked me, was I surprised? No, I'm not.
Some of the stuff that let's briefly discuss the raid here. So the naval forces, they entered the Barataria Bay with little warning. Some of the captains were already at the sea, the Lafitte's captains. So there was less resistance already there.
There's a question that he might have known they were coming and sent.
And then sent them out.
Sent some out.
Maybe, yeah.
I mean, I know that your instinct is very little resistance. Defend the base, but protect the ships. And your best guys, your captains and your best mates, like your good workers versus your shore workers. Yeah.
Sucks to be your shore guys, though.
Sorry, dudes. Everyone's going to jail.
Yeah, it did not take long for this raid to end. The people at the base were not prepared for full-scale naval assaults. Resistance was limited and uncoordinated. Several privateering vessels were captured. The shore positions were overrun. Remaining ships did attempt to escape into the marsh channels. Mr. Lafitte, Jean himself, was not captured. He had left prior to the raid, which gives a little more, I guess, credence to your theory there. I'm just saying. And as we mentioned already, Pierre was already imprisoned earlier.
Pierre couldn't leave because he was in the clink.
Some of the things that were seized from the raid: multiple ships, cannons, military stores, warehouse trade goods, documents, correspondence, large quantities of textiles, sugar, coffee, weapons, and maritime equipment. A lot of that was sold at later auction by U.S. authorities.
Yeah.
Very limited casualties, though. There was it was mostly just like a drug bust than anything else.
Yeah, it was like I do think it was more like a customs raid versus a military assault. And it helps that they, again, probably knew it was coming and didn't put up an armed defense.
Yep.
Like, we're going to let these guys come in here.
Well, and are
they're
you
going to
really
tear
gonna?
through our stuff. They're going to take some shit. They're going to leave.
We're already trying to negotiate like pardons for everybody at this point too. Like, you're really gonna try to mount a defense and fight and shoot a bunch of
I mean, not if you're smart.
officials, right? Yeah, exactly. So they did end up getting their deal after all things were said and done. Lafitte, they did directly contribute to the Battle of New Orleans, but it sounds like it might have been a bit exaggerated, like the importance of it.
So I looked at a couple of the historical, like the state park there, and then also like the National Park Service. They both have a little American portraits, historical,
Yeah.
for Jean Lafitte. No mention of Pierre in either one.
Yeah.
Not
The
cool,
smart one.
guys.
That's the smart
Not
one.
cool.
No.
Yeah.
Real pirates don't do it for the fame.
It's true. So, but there's a lot of like he was the Patriot pirate, and I just hate that.
That's just good marketing is all that is.
And here's the problem: we don't really have pirates. America, we have a few, but really, most of our pirates in the golden age of piracy, and this was 100 years before Lafitte, we have British and French and a couple Spanish, really famous Spanish pirates, but they're mostly British or former British.
Or Dutch. There's some Dutch ones.
There's a couple Dutch, but this is the golden age of piracy that we think about, like the Nassau pirate democracy, the Captain Danes and the Calico Jacks and all of that. That was I would say the next closest I can think of as an American pirate would be Blackbeard. But Ned Teach, the guy who we think was Blackbeard.
Edward Teach.
Ned.
Yeah.
I call him Ned.
Yeah. Nice.
Nettie. That's how he signed his name.
Right.
Nettie. Cute.
Nice.
I love Blackbeard. I have Blackbeard I could tell you a whole Blackbeard story some other time, but I have a close connection to Blackbeard. So he was kind of an American pirate toward the end of the golden age of piracy, in so much that he was stationed in Bathtown. That was where his home was, and his pirate lair was at Ocracoke, and like there was some, around there, North Carolina, Virginia, that area. But America doesn't really have named pirates that are famous in the way that we think of like the Buccaneers on like the big tall ships.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a desire for that. And I think Lafitte kind of fits that.
Oh, we're just trying to pretend like he's ours?
Well, he was ours. He fought for us.
Yeah.
And whether he was born in France or born in Haiti,
well, so we're half
so
the
Domingue,
people
however,
in America.
But he lived. That's how we get here.
Yes.
He lived in Louisiana, and when push came to shove, despite everything shitty that the American government did, he fought for Louisiana because he must have felt that was his home.
Yeah, not only that, but they fought well.
And then later, when he moved to Galveston, he would have probably fought for Galveston in the same way.
Yeah.
So I think it's fair, like that the Park Service wants him to be the Patriot pirate. Sounds cool.
Nah, I don't think that's.
I think it sounds rad.
He's more of a capitalist pirate. It's just when greed aligns.
Well, what pirates aren't capitalists,
I know,
Kyle?
exactly.
Let's be. There's a reason I love pirates.
All right. So let's talk about the contributions to the actual Battle of New Orleans.
Battle of New Orleans, and you'll have to fill me in because I was more interested in the economics of piracy.
There wasn't. So how many people actually participated? We learned from the peak of their empire. They probably had like 500 to 1,000 men working.
We
for
thought
them.
Between 500 and 1,000. Yeah.
Estimates suggest about 50 to 200 actual people from the organization participating.
I think it's going to be closer to 200 because there were 5 or 6 ships involved. So think about what you'd need for a. I mean, this is a sailing ship, right?
Most of them
no
were
fancy engine boats like
not just sailing ships. No, many of them served as artillery crews, but most of them, or a lot of them actually fought as infantry reserves too. So they were like on the ground too. They weren't just on ships.
Wow, they put their longshoremen up.
Right. There's several American officers too that later credited the Baratarians with improving the battery effectiveness. So I mean, they helped with the site artillery placements. They operated the heavy cannons. They trained militia units unfamiliar with the large guns. It sounds like they did some good work.
The training. I think the training would have been a really big deal at the time. Yes. You're talking about a military that you're calling guys up. I mean, it's basically like a volunteer
when you're talking about militia,
a conscript.
It could
Yeah,
be somebody who's
militia
never
service. These
operated a
aren't trained
cannon. Yeah,
soldiers,
yeah.
right? So to have a group of guys who are like, yeah, we're pirates.
I'll show you how to fire this thing
We'll
in like
show you
three
how to
shots a
fire these
minute.
cannons. Yeah, we got this.
Supplies were scarce. Apparently, the Lafitte's also provided a lot of gunpowder, flint, shot, and spare artillery equipment too. So it wasn't
Yeah, I
just
think that was
manpower.
the biggest that was the biggest thing I
Yeah,
saw was that they gave well, okay. Their supplies were used.
the supplies were used. It was valuable. It supported the
Valuable
efforts, but it was
supplies
not
were
decisive.
used.
It was
I'm
not
and
decisive.
I'm unclear on whether they were happy to donate those supplies or not.
Right. Okay, so let's move on and let's do some aftermath here. As we mentioned with Lafitte, he fades from the record. After his release from imprisonment and pardon, he appears to have briefly resumed his trading ventures, remained in the Gulf maritime commerce, but basically avoided anything. Did not
Yeah,
participate in any, nothing, no
Pierre
notoriety,
doesn't do
no large
much.
scale
Nope.
enterprises. Yeah, nothing.
Nope. Pierre doesn't
Um,
do much. It's almost like he's like, okay, I had my brush with fate.
it's funny they give me
Um,
like how they think he died, but it's like, how did you come up with this? None of this makes like this is all just complete
well, it was like a
made
yellow
up. Yeah,
fever thing, wasn't it?
yeah. Like what?
Um,
Like he
so
disappeared from the records in late 1810s. How do you know he died in 1821?
so statistically, wherever he was
Right.
living, there was a big everybody got it and a bunch of people
Oh, is
died
that what
and
it was?
and it's I think so. Like that's
Yeah.
typically how that works. You would say we don't have a death certificate, but we
No.
know that he didn't live past this certain amount of time. And toward the end of that, there
He's
was a big outbreak. And it wasn't dengue. I think it
yeah.
was like a malaria
It's
or a
probably yellow
yellow fever,
fever.
some kind of a yellow fever
Yeah.
that, um, and it killed like half the people living in the area where he was at. He would have already been
Oh, so
old. Like,
right. Yeah.
we
Okay. I
draw
can see why they.
conclusions. You put like a
Yeah.
dead question mark and hope for the best.
Well, he died.
But
He disappeared off the record after the 1810s.
he didn't have a wife or children that I was able to find. Pierre.
Hmm. Yeah.
It did not.
Also, I think another important thing to note too with Pierre, like he was not the one trying to cultivate the stories about himself. He wasn't trying to gain the
He
fame.
was trying to
So
be on the down low.
yeah.
For sure. He was doing business.
Now,
Business.
Mr.
Jean, on the
Jean.
other hand, had several wives that I was able to
Oh,
see in the historical record.
I wasn't even talking about that. I was talking about his attempt at legitimacy. Initially, he tried to
Wow.
do legal privateering commissions. But yeah, peacetime sharply reduced the legal scope of privateering and limited his opportunities. So by 1817, he relocated operations to Galveston Island, which was the part of Spanish Texas. That was the establishment of the new base at Galveston, which I didn't know Galveston's so cool. Like, I don't know.
Galveston is way
It's a
cool,
port town. Like, I
but
didn't know that was a
it's
pirate
it's a
town.
it would have to be.
Huh.
You didn't know Galveston was a pirate town?
No, I thought it was just for cruise ships.
Well, okay. Well, it's a pirate town.
Right. I did not know that. No, I did not know that.
So,
Um,
think about Galveston's like unique geography. I'm just saying to everyone listening as well. Like,
yeah.
think about Galveston's unique geography, its accessibility from the Atlantic, and that
All
it's
the
maybe like
Caribbean.
a little quieter hideaway from the Caribbean, but it still has a lot of ease of access. And also, most importantly, Galveston was Spanish for a long time, which
Yeah.
meant you were pretty out of the way of the U.S. authorities. They weren't going over there
Yeah.
causing no troubles.
When
So once the
Mr.
U.S. starts
Lafitte,
to come into the Caribbean, you've got to get into the Gulf a little further.
so Mr. Lafitte, he tried to present himself as a privateer serving revolutionary causes. He was trying to play on the Mexican War of Independence that was going on. In
Yeah.
practice, he basically reset up his Barataria activities. He had ships that were seized. They smuggled into U.S. ports, trafficked slaves, and sold captured cargo. It's basically the same thing, except it was smaller and less politically connected. I think because his brother Pierre wasn't there as part of it. Like he's trying to do all this himself
Yeah,
now at this point.
who do you leave in charge? I was thinking about that too. My brother and I are like we everything. It's the
Mhm.
two of us. And I kind of like when I was reading all of this, I'm like, oh, Jean and Pierre, they're like me and Jeff, right? They're doing everything together. And if one of us left, like what would the other one do? Like
Hmm.
obviously you keep on doing
Set up
whatever
a smuggling organization in Galveston.
Yeah, but you're
as
going to set up
you're
a
wont to
smuggling
do.
organization and whoop, you're going to set up a smuggling organization in Galveston. It's not going to be nearly as good as the one that you had help with from your brother.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
and that's not to slag on Jean, but it seems like he needed Pierre for those logistics, the money washing, the glad handing, the working with the
just looking at the pictures that we
class.
have, the drawings of the two brothers. It looks. I mean, Jean does not look like a charismatic dude.
They kind of look. Yeah, it's sort of. If you guys, you should put some up in post so that people can see. Jean looks like he's like offended someone is painting him. He's like, get away from me, kind of look at his face, and it's like, wow, you're not a people person, are you? I can just tell.
And you can
we
imagine,
talk sometimes about portraiture, right? You and I, how you almost can't help as the painter, your opinion of someone getting stumbling its way into a portrait.
You just smell the stink on this guy.
Whoever did the one of Jean with like the merchant hat, the weird okay, so that's also worth noting. I think pirates always wear a tricorner hat. This was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Pirates did it. They loved it. Benjamin Hornigold's crew lost their hats somehow. I don't know what happened. There was a story that they lost. They knocked down a merchant ship that was carrying hats solely to pilfer the hats from the cargo. And they all took the hat they wanted, and they patted the crew on the head, and they left. They didn't kill anyone. They shot some holes in the side of it. They took some hats. So hats were really important to pirates. Yes. Terrifying. I'm shitting my pants. You can have them all. Take all the hats, please. So Jean is not in this portrait, the famous portrait of him, or the only painted portrait of him. He's wearing this like pilgrim merchant hat. It's like the round. It's got kind of a big brim, and it's got like a red swath on it. It looks like a Dutch master's hat, from like the cigar box. I don't know what this hat is called. And haberdashers everywhere, I apologize for not having expertise on this topic, but he's not wearing a tricorner hat. And the tricorner hat was like a big deal for pirates. That was the fancy hat they all wanted to have.
So this must have been his legit year then. I don't know why
this pirate wants to be painted in a hat.
Was it between 1814 and 1817?
The angry face.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
It could have been. When was it painted? Was it painted during his straight years?
I don't think so. I think that it was in his younger years. He doesn't appear to be middle-aged yet.
Right.
And I say middle-aged, I mean like in his 40s. He appears to be a bit younger. Like maybe he had this painted. I don't know. I mean, he was married. He was married a couple times. Mm-hmm. So maybe it was part of a wedding portrait situation. I don't know. Oh, okay. I don't know the details of it, but there's a painting. You'll find it immediately.
Maybe this is a rest record.
The Dutch, yeah, right. He's wearing the Dutch master's looking hat.
Yeah.
And it's like, why is he wearing that hat? It's like a merchant hat.
Right.
So maybe, I don't know, maybe his brother was like, you can't wear your pirate hat in the painting.
You can't look like a pirate in the
Don't be
portrait.
Looking like a pirate.
It's the family portrait, dude.
It's the family portrait.
Right.
And you need to wear a respectable hat. I don't know. But he just looks like he's either a really unpleasant individual or the guy doing the portrait hated his guts.
Right.
That's all I can say about that.
Well,
there's your clip for this episode.
If that's any indication of how he was as a person, it only took 4 short years of trying to launch this Galveston operation before he's back on the United States' ship list, and they basically in 1821 came to try to effect his capture again. Rather than be captured, he evacuated everybody, burned as much of the settlement as he could, and abandoned the base. And that was like the last major territorial enterprise that Mr. Lafitte had.
Burn it when you leave. And he doesn't reappear as a landowner anywhere. He doesn't appear in any business records. I read again in one of these like state museum pieces that he moved on to some spot outside of Texas and became the treasurer for the local Masonic temple because you got to have the Masons in here somehow. Right. and under an assumed name, and married a different woman that wasn't his wife that he was married to.
My
when it
guess
all went
is
down
that
in Galveston.
he tried to go get the business going up again and just didn't have the same success anymore at this point.
Yeah, I think the accepted
He did continue his maritime ventures.
Yeah, that he died somewhere in obscurity.
Yep. Yep.
You know, sort of broke. You know, that he took that $1.5 billion that he had and blew it, lost it.
Well, that's what happens
right
when you go from pillaging.
I mean, who knows?
That's what happens when you go from pillaging English ships to Mexican ships.
Right? You know, I don't think, you know, there was any like children or any, what's the word I'm looking for?
Offspring?
No, like a will or like
oh yeah,
you would pass. Like,
no, there's no death certificate, no body, no grave, nothing.
And he didn't have any. There was no legal documentation to give anything he had to anyone else. So the assumption is he didn't have anything. Like, I think.
I wonder if that's still in probate right now.
That'd be amazing if it was in probate for 200 years. If you can find that, I will go to Galveston with you. Like we'll unearth that project ourselves. It would be amazing.
So I think that pretty much wraps up everything that I had research wise. Is there anything else pirate material
I mean,
that you
unless you want to do do you want to do pirate word trivia?
See how many of them are still in use in the Navy?
Well, okay, so I actually some of the pirate words. All right, big secret about me: I love pirates.
It must be a pasta.
Who doesn't? Pirates, astronauts, dinosaurs. Like if you're, imagine what a 12-year-old likes, and that's what I like. So, I love pirate words, and I have spent my life kind of making a mental note of the different words, like phrases and words that I hear that were originated from, like their etymology leads back to the golden age of piracy. So, like walk the plank, like what Captain Hook does to Wendy and Peter Pan, it's that never happened. But a thing called keel hauling did happen.
Oh God, yeah, that's just
where they throw you over the side and
drag you from one side to the other.
From one to the and it was like death by 1,000 barnacles, and I was like fascinating. A few people are reported to have surved keel hauling.
I am surprised by that.
I would rather die.
Right?
Than remember that.
Because it's also salt water too. Don't forget that you're not just getting scraped apart, but you're also in the salt water too.
And the fear of drowning while all this is happening.
Yeah. Like, so keel hauling was not in the Navy when I was in.
Keel haul, I don't think so. But walking the plank was probably not in the Navy either. Things that I think that were in the Navy when you were in the Navy probably was clean slate.
Clean slate. I don't remember.
Clean slate. Really? Yeah, that means nothing happened on the watch. No one wrote anything down on the chalkboard.
Oh, so we got paper logs by then.
Yeah, okay. So you didn't have, it wasn't posted like a board. Scuttlebutt. Scuttlebutt
was one. That's the water drinking fountain.
Yeah, people don't know scuttlebutt. So the scuttle was the barrel that had the water in it versus like rum or sugar or anything else. And people would go to the scuttle and they would get their water, on their break. And it was like the water cooler where you gossip around the water cooler. So I love that scuttlebutt had a real like origin.
What was the other one that we used to have for the vending machines? We call them a geeduck machine. That's the sound the food makes.
Well, and like there's a whole lot of like funny things that are like above board, right? Mm-hmm. We don't think of that as being like a Navy or a pirate term, but if the crew is above board, like you can see them on the deck, they're probably not pirates. If you go past a ship and there's no one they're all hiding, waiting to come and get you. So an above board ship is like a trustworthy ship.
That's a good one. That's a great one.
Do you know what a bombard is?
That's like it's a type of firearm, isn't it?
It is not. It is an 8-pint cask that used to hold rum or another. So if you got bombarded, you got bombed.
You
drank. Yeah. That's so, similar to 3 Sheets to the Wind, right? Which is someone's gotten so drunk that they're no longer controlling the ropes and the sheets are flapping.
Right.
Which brings me to the end of my rope. That's another not necessarily a Navy term, like an everyone term. Also the bitter end. So that the anchor rope, what it was tied to on these ships, because they didn't have like a mechanical wheel that did the rolling. Human.
Well, yeah,
no.
the men they would reel it themselves. Yeah.
Yep, they would reel it themselves, and the thing it was tied to was called the bit. And when the anchor was all the way out, it was at the bitter's end.
Right, right.
So like you're out. I'm at the end of I'm at my rope's end. I'm at the bitter end.
Got nowhere to go.
The end of so I was like that. So there's like a significant overlap there. Did you guys ever say getting into a flap?
I mean, I've said that, but not in the Navy.
Yeah, like bad communication. Okay, I wasn't sure if that was a Navy thing or an everyone thing.
I think it's an everyone thing.
Yeah. So my personal favorite is freezing the balls off a brass monkey.
Oh yeah, the cannonballs.
Yeah, I love that. That's like it's the most absurd thing, and I love it because it involves like
there's a whole Beastie Boys song about brass monkeys.
It is. I know. And it's brass monkey's its own thing separately. Yeah. And every time when I was young, I heard freeze the balls off a brass monkey, I was like the liquor from the Beastie Boys song.
So what happened is as the things would squeeze together, then they would if it squeezed enough or got cold enough, then the balls would like shoot off, right?
Yeah. So there's two types of metal, and I experienced this one time doing a sub-zero mountain bike race with a steel and aluminum parts. On the crank of the mountain bike, not good. They shrink at different rates.
Yes.
So what would happen was the monkey was like we have a dolly. They just called it a monkey.
It's the thing that held the cannonballs. Had little
and it was made from brass, and they'd sit in. They could drag it around, so they could drag a group of cannonballs around on the monkey. But the cannonballs were made from steel, so when it would get really cold, the steel and the brass would shrink at a different rate. The brass would shrink first and get smaller, and the balls would fall off of it. And I love that so much because when you say it out loud, that is absolutely not what it sounds like.
Right.
I don't know how you freeze the balls off a monkey, but it's funny as hell.
Especially a brass one.
Right. What kind of monkey are we talking about here? So that's my personal favorite. But yeah, there's all kinds of, I would encourage anyone who's interested in pirates at all to look at how much of our colloquial slang is pirate slang or naval slang. Like we don't give you guys enough credit for our cultural achievements.
We don't look for it.
such as I'm groggy.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, grog, I'm groggy. That's another one.
That's like, what is grog? Like a mix of water and ale, I think?
Grog is rum and water.
Rum and water?
Yeah.
Gross.
Yep. So, it is.
Yeah, that sounds awful. Grum and hardtack. Grog and hardtack.
Grog and hardtack. Yeah, they thought that grog would help with scurvy.
Oh, yeah, whoops.
Which it doesn't.
Why not throw some more liquor at it?
Makes scurvy worse. Yeah, throwing liquor at scurvy makes scurvy worse. Yes, I agree. But that's also why there are oranges in Florida.
Yes.
Pirates.
You can thank the pirates.
Thank the pirates for oranges in Florida. So, I mean, that's...
maybe the Navy.
Yeah, I mean, but let's call it pirates. Come on. Yeah. Let's see. Can we just give the pirates a little...
Yeah, we'll give them this one. All right.
Okay.
All right.
2 dinosaurs for the pirates. Oh, can we say how terrible human trafficking is?
Yes, we can end on that note because it's time to wrap up. You want to... Or is that all you wanted to say?
Well, no, chattel slavery, I don't know. I wasn't sure where I was going with that. I just know that we said earlier that was, we're not going to grade Jean Lafitte or his brother Pierre, because we only grade presidents, but, I can only give them 5 out of 10 points because they lose automatically 50% of anything they get on account of chattel slavery.
Who have we've covered how many people that were not presidents? We've done Abigail Adams. We've done Frederick Douglass. Have we done anybody else other than those 2?
Did you do Benjamin Franklin?
No, I don't think we have yet.
Well, we should.
So you can rank the 3 that we've covered so far then.
No, I can't. I can't do that.
Oh, God, I know, right? How do you rank Abigail and Frederick Douglass? All I know is that Jean is at the bottom.
Jean is 3. The other 2, I can't. What do I do? Okay, she's a personal hero.
right?
And he's the greatest orator of American history.
Possibly the greatest American.
Possibly the greatest American. I mean, that's impossible for me. Like, I don't know. That's hard to do. But I'm just saying he loses any points that he could have gotten on account of chattel slavery was still a thing that was happening with humans at that time. Like humans were selling other humans as if they were property. And I know technically the importation of slavery had been banned in the United States, but there was clearly still a market for it, because whenever there's a market for something that's been banned, someone will rise up to the occasion and fulfill it. And that's just gross. Also, because I know you're headed there eventually, banning the importation of slaves, it's hard to say whether that was better or worse than what happened going forward in this country. And I know that you and our families weren't here when that happened, and we bear no responsibility for this. But I think it's important to acknowledge. We talk a lot about economies and pirates, and the pirate economy was not good. Not good. He was doing not good stuff.
Yes.
It wasn't just, the federal government came in, they seized a bunch of cotton and sugar and munitions and all kinds of other stuff. And they didn't seize any people, because the very first thing he sold was the people. And he did that so he didn't have to feed them in between getting them home and selling them.
Yeah.
Humans went straight to market. And that's gross, and it sucks. So it's worth mentioning. Sorry.
That's all right.
Flail around when I get stressed out about things.
Well, I think that's a good spot to end it for today. So
yeah,
maybe join us.
End it on a happy note.
Maybe join us next time, and we might be ready to cover Lincoln, or maybe Ray will do some research for us, and we can do that Revolutionary Woman episode that we've been wanting to do for so long.
I would love to do a Revolutionary Women episode. I would love to hear from anyone who has a revolutionary woman that they want to talk about.
Well, we already covered Abigail, so I mean.
Well, there's women that we haven't covered yet.
You don't need to feel bad leaving her off the list, because I know there's a lot to get through. I'd love to hear more about Betsy Ross.
Yeah, I think Betsy's important. There were reportedly
Martha Washington would be more interesting to learn more about.
I would like to hear about some of the women who actually assisted. The British are coming. Lamp lighting across the seaboard.
Right? It wasn't just Paul Revere.
It was not just Paul Revere. Right. It turns out there were a lot of women, and they were unfortunately. This is we'll talk about it maybe. What's that? Teaser for next time. I was going to say spoiler, but that's not right. Teaser. There were a lot of women who we're not going to talk about that did a lot of things during that very first wave of American resistance. And the reason we don't talk about them is because they were the kind of women that we don't talk about in history.
Oh, they were loose?
Oh, absolutely. No, they were. They were prostitutes. They were innkeepers. They were women who didn't have husbands.
God, I was making a joke, but all right.
No, they were. So, this idea that as the British are coming, we're lighting the eastern seaboard up. Who's around?
Mm-hmm.
It's the single women who y'all don't want to talk about. So, it's good. I've heard some other stories too that they were that they gave a lot of they did a lot of prep on the boats as far as help stocking supplies. They were doing, and there was a woman, and I don't know her name, and maybe someone can send it to you, or I'll find her when I do my research again. Donated, went around getting metal and donating it to have shot made and cannonballs made, and there were a lot of women who were on
I know Abigail did a lot of that. Yeah,
Abigail did a lot, but there were a lot of women on the fringes who were living lives that maybe were not, considered acceptable.
They'd have a Scarlet A, you mean?
Who pitched in and who fought really hard with the resources that they had to make this country happen. So I would love to talk about some of them. So,
right.
Anybody who knows one or has an ancestor who was one, I would love to hear from them.
Oh, hell yeah. And while you're waiting for us to put that together, you can let us know what we missed in the comments. And also email us at buckstartierpodcast@gmail.com if you're shy. Visit the website, buckstartierpodcast.com. You can sub to us on YouTube and Instagram to see all our great content. And we will see you all next time. I'm not going to say week because I don't know if it will be.
Yeah, what time that's going to be.
It'll be soon. Produced by China Shop Production.